Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
I'm pretty sure you've all seen this photo in the news. Before we get started, I'm writing this on a burner account for anonymity. I could get into some real trouble for doing this since I'm revealing information that only the Amarillo Zoo management really knows. Before we get hired, most of us sign an NDA. It's the standard stuff, but it means if anyone finds out who wrote this, I could be in some serious legal trouble. I attempted to post this on 4chan, but it was largely ignored or told me I was a liar. Maybe you guys will hear me out though. Even if you don't, I need to get this out of my mind. So, about that photo. It's a photo from security camera footage at the zoo, as you all probably already know. The city finally released it to the public on Twitter because, long story short, they're frightened. We all are. I've never believed in the supernatural or cryptozoology, seeing as I've been working with and studying real animals for most of my life. But I don't have words for what we've experienced lately. I'm genuinely incapable of explaining it. Science doesn't touch events like this, and I'm at a loss to explain it beyond the conclusions we've all come to, which I'll explain later on. All of this started about 2 months ago or so, back in April. I was with a few other zookeepers, doing the usual routine. Cleaning up pens, feeding the animals, and whatnot. It was somewhat late at night, after closing time, about 11 p.m. or so. I'm filling the feed in the exotic bird area when I notice 2 or 3 parrots are dead. This was obviously concerning to us, as we all care a lot about the animals we care for. We aren't exactly flush with cash, and the Amarillo Zoo, although popular, doesn't make a lot of money. Losing critters out of nowhere can be a real blow to revenue since it can cost a lot to replace the animals. Anyways, I'm getting off track. The point is, birds are dead. Out of nowhere, might I add. It was only a few, sure, but if they kept dropping off like that, it would be bad news. So I let the other zookeepers know about it, and we decided to search the cage. Perhaps some snot-nosed kid had fed the birds something poisonous, or maybe there was an illness or virus spreading among the birds. This was nothing too big, so when we let management know about it the next day, they largely shrugged it off. We sent the carcasses to a vet to get them tested anyway, to see what killed them. Well, the tests at the vet's office did not turn anything back. Like, at all. No poisons, no evidence of illness even. Not so much as a feather out of place. They had just dropped dead. It was weird, but we sort of forgot about it. A few weeks later, we found more animals dead. We find 3 goats, largely in the same manner as the birds. We got them tested too because clearly, this was not something random. Management catches wind of this, so we start beefing up security and keeping an eye on visitors. We start making more announcements to not feed the animals, etc. You guys might not know this, but zookeepers have a pretty demanding schedule. It can vary by the zoo, but many of us sleep in bunks at the zoo so we can take care of the animals 24/7. You know, in case a lion or chimp breaks out and we need to make another harem meme. We tend to rotate in schedules so each of us gets the chance to sleep at home a few days a week. So in addition to the other stuff, we start taking turns watching the security footage at night. The deaths don't stop happening though, and we aren't seeing anything at night. In early May, we noticed a few of the sheep in our petting zoo section missing. They just straight up vanished. It was very frustrating. By this point, we start getting the police involved. We call them up and tell them what's been happening. They say they'll leave an officer around along with our security to watch things at night until the weird stuff stops happening. We zookeepers start really watching our security cameras too. Whatever was happening, it was probably some crafty creep who got a kick out of killing animals for fun. My colleagues and I were getting pissed too. The animals were clearly stressed, and a few of them stopped eating regularly. We hated the thought of someone trying to hurt innocent animals for fun. Well, then the really scary stuff starts happening. We got up in the morning and found the sheep that were missing. Or what was left of them. Their skins were all we found, strewn about the sidewalk near the zoo's entrance. We knew it was our sheep because their ID tags were included with the fur. Police say they didn't see anything the night before. Security says the same thing. We are all baffled. We managed to get it all cleared up before the zoo opens. We decide to keep the strange happenings under wraps so as to not alert the individual doing this. We don't want them to know we're onto it. A full day passes without incident. We had a normal day the next day too when at night, I heard a bunch of shouting. It was around 2 a.m. and the security guard was running for his life. He's shouting for the cops and is shaking all over. Says he saw something climb over the wall to the lion exhibit. Says it was covered in fur. The police have him show them where it's at, and when we all get there, there's nothing. We check the security footage, and all we manage to capture is some movement in the darkness in the lion's area. The security guard is crying and saying it was a werewolf. We laughed him out of the room. He kept insisting it was a werewolf. Like something out of Harry Potter, he says. We laugh at him. We're sure at this point it was probably some coyote that managed to find a way into the zoo at night. The sheep skin was weird, but maybe the thing had been eating the carcass nearby in the wooded area by the zoo. It is called Thompson Memorial Park. It's small, but it could hide a coyote or two. The incidents don't stop though. We start finding organs in the enclosures. Just out of nowhere. And they weren't random. Intestines, in the shape of a heart on the floor of the porcupine exhibit. 2 sheep eyeballs in the holes of our wooden fences. We had been watching the cameras, and we couldn't really see anything except for quick flashes of white from time to time. The animals were still acting strange. Normally friendly animals suddenly just stayed in their sleeping areas, even when fed. We were really freaked out at this point, and the police started sending more officers to patrol the zoo at night. It all culminated on May 21st. It was 3 a.m., the usual night. It was quiet out, and I was watching the cameras with a security guard. We were looking at one of the outside camera areas when we noticed it. The photo above captures exactly what we saw. I was stunned when I saw it. At first, it sort of reminded me of that dude who was walking around during the riots in DC. Some guy wearing a coyote pelt on his body. But it wasn't right. Its limbs were strangely animalistic, and yet still strangely human. Not only that, but I don't know if any of you have noticed, it was holding some kind of stick. It was doing this weird freezing jerking motion. It would pace and then freeze. It would stay perfectly still. Then it would jitter about and start pacing again. We phoned the police obviously and said there's an intruder on the fence, that it might be our guy. Well, 3 or 4 officers go right toward the fence. I'm out there since I wanted to see this individual get arrested. The police decide to split up and they point their guns at it. They start yelling at it to stop right where it is and not to move and that it was under arrest. The thing starts heaving. The security footage uses night vision, so it may seem like we could see it easily, but in real life, it was pitch black out. They get their flashlights out and point them at this thing. It's the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. Eyes totally devoid of color, just milky white like some kind of demon. Sharp teeth. I begin to wonder if that security guy was right after all. Maybe it was some sort of werewolf. But I've had time to think about it, and the moon wasn't full that day. It sounds childish and dumb, but when you've seen something so unexplained you start grasping for straws trying to figure it out. So the thing is making this jittery movement, and it starts to make a rattling sound, sort of like when you hear sprinklers go off in your yard. The thing is furry, and the police start yelling louder because it's moving toward the officers on the other side of the fence. It started screaming and it was the most god-awful sound. Like boiling a puppy alive. The officers are terrified like we all were, and they start shooting at it. I've never seen anything like it. Thinking about it now makes me want to cry, like seriously. It took 5 shots dead center in the chest and to the head and it didn't even flinch. The officers see this and shoot at it more. But it just takes it, without so much as a flinch, still screaming, but louder now. It suddenly moves lightning fast and is on the other side of the fence. I gasped and started running. I could hear its screams and the rattling. The officers realize their guns are useless against this thing and they start backing away. We all start booking it back to the zookeeper's bunk area. We sat in that room and the officers called in backup. Meanwhile, the thing was jerking its way around the enclosure and making its way around the zoo. We waited in the security camera room, watching the security cameras and waiting for the other police to come. We watch this thing walk in the zoo like it's nothing, jittering around in its weird way. We can hear it screaming to some extent still. Suddenly, we watch as the thing vanishes. I can't really describe it. It was there and then suddenly it wasn't. The backup arrives, and they search the park. Officers take our stories. They find nothing in the zoo. We check the footage again. We have it on camera. We didn't have good footage of it inside the zoo, but the footage outside the fence is crystal clear. We are all freaked out. I didn't sleep or wink that night. We start debating about what it was to pass the time. It is all we can talk about when we get to work. We wonder if it was a werewolf. Agree that werewolf is a bad explanation. We start wondering if it's an alien, a demon, or something else. One of our colleagues says he knows what it is. Says he's heard stories about things like it when he was growing up in Arizona. He mentions what he thinks it is, and I realize I've actually heard of the thing before too. Given everything we had seen, it makes a lot of sense and matches up with everything. I'm not gonna say what it is here. If the legends I've heard are true, and I believe they are true now, it's bad mojo to even talk about them. It's dark and evil that the Navajo take it very seriously. If you still can't figure out what I'm talking about by now, Google Navajo and scary stories. That should bring up all you need to know. All I need to know is that one of those things is stalking the zoo. The footage is remarkable. It made it to the mayor's office. It has had the police department totally stumped. It has had the entire city spooked. They've been looking at that footage over and over again trying to come up with a rational explanation. They can't. That's why the city of Amarillo tweeted out the footage. A lot of people have taken this all as a joke, but I assure you none of us are laughing. We are all terrified. The whole world knows now. The only good news about all of this is that the weird shit has stopped happening. We still hear rattling at night though when we're walking around the zoo. You might have noticed the zoo put out a statement saying no animals had died. That's technically true, but only because we had listed the earlier deaths as natural. That was before we realized they weren't. I'm typing all this right now on little sleep. I haven't been able to sleep well since I've seen that thing's eyes. I've finally had a day or two off zoo duty, so I'm at home typing this. I'm using a VPN, so hopefully no one can trace this post back to me. But maybe I suppose I shouldn't mind if I get fired. Truth is, at this point, I'm not sure I want to go back.
It took moving 1,000 miles away to finally feel comfortable enough to tell you this story. This happened just before my senior year of high school over a period of 3 weeks in the summer. I was 17 years old, drug-free and sober. At the most I took Advil for headaches every now and again. I just want to assure you I was not on any mind-altering substances or long-term medication that could affect my cognitive ability. During the summer my curfew was 11 p.m., and this occurred while driving home from my boyfriend's house, which took roughly 15 minutes, so let's say about 10:45 at night. I was full of energy at this age and a night owl, so I was not even remotely tired. In fact, I was hyped up with the warm summer nighttime breeze, car windows down, singing along to the radio. I took a shortcut through back roads to avoid going into the tiny city with its jerk cops. Also, one of the roads I took was super straight and flat, so I could really speed, and that feels great when you're a teenager. But right before that road I had to take 2 very close turns to get onto it. First I'd take a right turn that was more than 90 degrees almost back the way I had come, then in exactly half a mile I would turn left onto the long straight road where I could really put the gas pedal down. Since it was only half a mile, I normally didn't speed up that much because the small stretch of road was more like packed gravel and it would be a waste, as I would have to slow down again to turn left onto the much better road where I could let loose. The tiny property on the inside corner of the left turn is where all this went down. A house had recently been built there, 2 stories with a detached garage, and it seemed odd how quickly it had been erected as we built our family house, and it took us a year to finish it. I will start at the beginning because I believe this is all related. Week 1, I am positively jamming to my music. The wind whipping through my car feels great and I'm relaxed in my very familiar drive home. I slow down to make my right turn onto the rough rural road, just be bopping along when my lights illuminate something stunning sitting on the corner of the road. It's a wolf, a real wolf, a solid white real wolf. I know the difference between my dog breeds and a wolf. I love watching dog competitions, wildlife documentaries, and have even met a 4th wolf in person. They look different from domestic dogs. This was a wolf and it was amazing and blew my mind. I slow down even more while I turn down my music. I'm getting close to it, and I notice that it's not minding me at all. It is sitting perfectly still on the corner of the road staring at the house. Almost unblinking, its ears didn't even flick towards me. All its attention was focused on this house. I was so close I could have reached out my window and brushed the fur on the back of its head. I was smiling and amazed, but my mind was already churning. It made no sense for a wolf to be behaving like that, even less for there to be a white wolf in rural North Alabama in the summer. I came to a complete stop behind it, marveling at its fur and presence. I felt euphoric, like I had seen something rare and blessed. My mind made a jump to the local Indian stories of animal spirit guardians, and I started to wonder. I couldn't stay though. Mom would never believe me if I told her I was late because of a spirit wolf. With a sigh, I said goodbye to the wolf and drove home in a better mood than ever. I got to see something special and it filled me with emotions of joy and peace. Week 2, I was driving home again and I had been taking extra care to keep an eye out for my wolfie buddy, hoping to see him again around that area, so I drove extra slow with my window down and radio off. That was a horrible mistake. I should have realized what the presence of a guardian meant. It meant danger. Alas, I was on the short road approaching the new little house. Then I saw the thing that to this very day makes me question my sanity, my reality, and possibility of eldritch terrors as Lovecraft described. It was crouched right before their mailbox, its limbs folded and pulled in tight with its hunched posture, yet its head was still taller than the box. It was mottled green and black with undertones of blue, and it looked wet and slimy all over. Its head was elongated, allowing for an extended maw full of razor-sharp teeth. The upper half of its body looked emaciated, with barely more than frog-like thin skin pulled over angular long bones, ropey muscles to hold it upright, and at the end of its grossly stretched arms were equally terrible long fingers, while its legs had bulk to them and looked equipped for running, with back-facing knees for sprinting, and tipped in raptor-like curved claws. It looked tall, maybe 7 feet, maybe more, just folded up into this predator's posture, waiting for prey. Then there were its eyes. Solid black and sunken. I still want to vomit thinking about its eyes looking at me. Then I realized. It's going to look at me. It's going to see me, and there is no avoiding it. Panic, terror unique to this alien thing swallowed me instantly, feeling like I was tilting off the world I had always known and into an abyss where monsters like this exist. I couldn't breathe, but I had to get my window up. I had to get my window up, or I would be ripped by those teeth and torn with those claws. Blood would adorn the cabin of my car, and I would become an unsolved mystery. I had a manual crank window, because I was scared of crashing into water and not being able to get out of my car, but now I realized that there were far worse things in the world than crashing into water. Its head was turning towards me, and I had let off the gas, but I was still getting closer to it. It made me want to scream, but I had to get my window up first, and I was cranking it as hard as I could. I was starting to cry as I finally got the window closed, and then I put my gas pedal to the floor. Gravel road be damned. I thought I must not look at it as I pass. I must not look at it or make direct eye contact. I just shouldn't. It's not good to connect with these things. I've already seen too much. My tires had found grip, and I started to launch forward, passing it. In my peripheral vision, I could see it starting to unfold its limbs, and it sent a terrible chill down my spine. I'm screwed. I'm really screwed. I was mumbling through my tears as I slid around the turn, fishtailing for a moment before I rocketed down the road. I felt sick, my heart was hammering, I had snot and tears rolling down my face, and my hands were shaking. I glanced in my rear-view mirror and could only see darkness as there were no street lamps out there. I used a trick to tap my brakes soft enough the light comes on, but I don't actually slow down. Red lit up the dust that was billowing up in my wake, but amidst the swirling chaos I thought I saw a darker shadow than the rest, a tall, thin shadow. I had enough and decided I was going to drive straight to the lighted roads and not let off the gas again the rest of the way. No more looking back. I was going to drive 109 miles per hour, which is as fast as I can go before my governor kicks in. I even ran a stop sign at the end of the road, because I was not going to get caught by this thing if I could help it. I took a right onto the highway and flew home. I might have even been relieved to get pulled over, but I did not. When I got home, no one was awake. I was pretty trusted to come home on time, so I called my boyfriend and cried to him for a long time before I was able to explain. He was dismissive and thought I was pulling a joke on him. Then he thought I was just being crazy and seeing things. There's many reasons we didn't stay together, but his insensitivity contributed. Week 3, I refused to take my shortcut anymore. For that reason, I would have to leave my boyfriend's house a bit early, and he'd been making fun of me about it all week. One of the days we went to a park to walk around, and on the way back he decided he wanted to drive by the house where I saw that thing. I was hysterical, begging him not to drive there, but he would not be dissuaded, so as we got closer and I could not stop him, I leaned my passenger side seat all the way back and pulled myself down, cowering in panic of getting near the place. I hid below the window and covered my eyes while panting heavily, reliving the traumatic night in my mind again. At one point he stopped the car.
Annette, you have to see this.
No, I whined, resisting him pulling at my arm.
No, you really have to see this, look.
He said in a changed tone of astonishment. Tears in my eyes, I uncurled and slowly peeked over the rim of the window. The house was gone, burnt clear down to the foundation with only a handful of framing beams still standing. The ground around the house was blackened in a perfect large circle. My boyfriend started to get out of the car. I shouted, "No, let's get out of here." While I grabbed his arm, but he easily avoided me and got out. He walked around the ashy piles of the ruins for a bit, using a stick to poke at this and that. When he finally came back, he had an intense look of thinking on his face.
There was no evidence of any personal belongings, furniture, power wiring, or even interior walls. It doesn't seem like other burned-out houses. Something's weird.
When we got to his house, he searched for news articles about any house fires in the area. There weren't any. He called the closest fire station, and was quickly brushed off by the person that answered, as they didn't know about a fire there and didn't have time to find out before quickly hanging up on him. I never wanted to see that place again. I went out of my way to avoid the roads in that area. Talking about it still makes my chest tighten, my skin crawl, and my eyes water. My brain still has trouble because I know I saw it, a thing that is nothing like any creature known to humans, yet still I saw it. This is near Moulton, Alabama. This happened to me in summer 2002.
I'm sure most people laugh when they hear stories like these, but I just can't. I was face to face with what I can only describe as a werewolf in 1987 here in southern Illinois. I was only 10, but I know what a big dog looks like and actually owned a huge St. Bernard at the time, and this thing dwarfed him. I was walking alone down a road that parallels some thick woods, and when I heard movement in the brush, I stopped and looked towards the noise, and to my absolute horror, a huge black wolf-looking head came out of the brush and it was looking at me. I don't know if it was on 2 legs or 4, but it was taller than I was. I was only 10, so 4'5" or so. Suddenly it came bursting out of the woods towards me and I thought I was dead. I don't know what happened at that point, but obviously it didn't grab me. All I can remember from that part is that it was in my face and then it wasn't. My mom remembers seeing me running home with a look of terror, so she met me outside. She knew something bad had happened but didn't know what it was. She says I was shaking uncontrollably and had wet myself and kept saying, "A werewolf just tried to take me." She says that she doesn't know what I encountered, but I was a tough kid who was always outside and wasn't prone to making up stories. She says the next day I brought a book home from the school library titled, Meet the Werewolf, and became obsessed with anything werewolf related. I wouldn't go outside for a long time after that, even when all the other kids were outside. We moved the next year to a city 100 miles away and I got back to normal again. I moved back to the same rural town when I was 18 and have lived here ever since. It's a small town on Rend Lake in Jefferson County, Illinois. I know what I saw and will never forget its face, as it wasn't a dog. I go into the woods quite a bit alone and sometimes I get a bit worried, but I also always carry a gun just in case. Be safe when alone in rural areas because these dogman things are real. My late wife had a daytime encounter with what she called a 7-foot-tall black werewolf standing on 2 legs in 2001, just about 5 miles from where I had my encounter. The only difference is that she was driving and had the relative safety of being in a car. It proved to me that they do exist and are in the area, so at least I know to be careful when in the woods instead of being like everyone else who don't have a clue until they are face to face with one. It's scary to know they are real, but I think it's better to be aware of them, so I know to take precautions when in the woods, and I tell anyone who will listen despite being laughed at by some. But those who know me best know that I am not crazy and that I do not make up stories, so they believe me. I think telling them will keep them out of harm's way, or at least make them be a little more cautious about being out alone. Also, my uncle had a Bigfoot encounter in 1981 while in the outskirts of the Shawnee National Forest. He never went back and is afraid to be outside after dark if there are any woods around. He is 60 now and he is still scared of the things that don't exist. He's a huge guy himself but is terrified of seeing that thing again. The funny thing is that he actually laughed at me when I told him about the werewolf-looking thing that almost got me. I think that he thought I was joking at first, but I told him just like Bigfoot that you imagined, and he changed his tune. He said it was probably a Bigfoot that I saw, but it was most certainly not. It was a giant black wolf that was taller than me, not a gorilla-looking thing.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.